Good morning from Paris. I am here to race the Hoka City Centre Paris 10K, heading down to the start line shortly. We've got the whole race is right in the heart of the city, really winding around some of the most central parts of Paris, which should be very interesting. It's quite a twisty course, so it might not necessarily be the fastest, but it should be very fun, and it should be a really good chance to see a bit of Paris whilst running hard. I had a pretty big week of marathon training in Valencia 2 weeks away, so to go out, run as fast as I can. No real expectations on time, but hoping to put in a half decent performance, have a bit of fun. I am testing a few bits out as always. So I've got on my feet the Hoka Rocket X2. Been a long time since I raced in these shoes. I've used them for some hard training runs recently, and obviously they came out last year now, so I thought it'd be fun to put those on again as the races with Hoka and try out what is still probably the carbon shoe I'd recommend most from their range, just because Cielo X1, as much as I love it, is quite a big, heavy shoe, and this is a bit more lightweight and racy. And then on the watch front, I've got the new Coros Pace Pro, which I am putting up against the Garmin Forerunner 265, the big new mid-range battle we have of AMOLED watches. So going to be testing those both on what will be a very tricky course with GPS, twisting around right in the heart of the city centre, and I will have the Forerunner 965 in a pocket linked to a Polar VeriSense heart rate monitor, so I can look at the heart rate readings on the watches as well. So yeah, a few bits to test. Looking forward to the race. Should be good fun, good hit out. 2 weeks for Valencia, see where the legs are at. They're quite tired is my guess, but I'm hoping to have a good run, and it should be really fun. So all done. That went really well in the end. I think I ran something like 32:25, 32:30, something like that, like faster than I expected. Just first half was very controlled, running on field, trying not to slip over. It was very wet today, and I went through, I think, in around 16:15, and then I thought, I can give it a go here. I felt quite good, and I think I ran the second half in not too far over 16, so I'm not sure the exact time will be, but I think it's probably my second fastest 10K, so I'm very pleased, because obviously pretty tired legs, marathon training, it's a pretty twisty course. It was wet, so it rained on the way to the course. There's a lot of cobbles in the first half, and I'll say the Hoka Rocket X2, as fast and great as they were today, they are not the best at gripping on that kind of surface, so I have to be quite careful. I don't tend to slip very much because I have such a short stride, but yeah, it looks a bit dodgy at times, so that was a bit risky. And the course was really cool though. It was like, you're right in the centre of Paris, you're just winding around, you're seeing lots of cool stuff. Quite a lot of good runners out today, so I was able to run with people the whole way pretty much, and really long home straight, which is kind of good and bad. It's just demoralising in the first kind of like 45 seconds of a straight like that. You don't look like you're getting any closer, but then started to pick it up, felt nice and good, and yeah, delighted with that time. If it is around there, I'll be really pleased with that. It's pretty much, like I say, second fastest 10K. Fastest was recently at the River Ness 10K, which is a nice downhill stretch in it, which you don't get here. So yeah, good run all round. Watches, it's a hard course for watches. So I think even probably from about second or third K, they were, I was a few, probably 50 metres ahead on GPS, that kind of thing. So they were beeping early before the lap markers, but not too bad overall results. So I'll have a look at them in a minute, and then go back and look at the GPS trace later. Wasn't really using the watches much today, because it was meant to be just, like a nice relaxing hit out kind of thing, nice and controlled. Rocket X2, it's a shoe. I've come back to a few times recently. I've underrated a little bit probably, because it is light, it's fast, it doesn't have the bouncy feeling of some of the shoes I like. And I think the problem I have with it generally is that it does a similar job for me in being a lightweight, pretty firm, but responsive shoe, similar to the Asics Metaspeeds like Sky Paris, which I always bang on about, my favourite shoe, and that's just a fair bit lighter. So, but yeah, I ran really well today and really enjoyed the shoe. Everything felt in good working order for Valencia, put it that way, but I'll go back and check heart rate and GPS on the watches. I think the Coros was actually closer to the lap markers for sure than the Garmin. So throughout the race, that was probably the one that was definitely close. I think Garmin ended up probably 100 metres further over 10K than the Coros, but on a twisty course, it's hard to exactly know. But all around, really enjoying myself. It's quite cold now. I'm going to go warm up and we'll go from there. So just back at the hotel now, a couple of hours after the race. Still very pleased, really delighted with how that went all round. Just didn't have too many expectations heading into today. Was careful and trying to be nice and conservative, and actually was just running fast than I thought I'd be the whole way, and picked up pretty well in the second half there. I think I ran a negative split, something like, I think I was about 16:15, 16:16 at the halfway mark, and then did around 16:01 or so in the second half. So yeah, really pleased with that all round. Massive confidence boost ahead of Valencia in a couple of weeks to be running that kind of pace on a pretty big week. All good on that front, and really, did enjoy the race. It is a twisty course, but it was probably a bit quicker than I expected. There were only a couple of real dead turnarounds, and the rest of the time, there were some decent long straights. There were lots of fast runners there today, so I was able to run in pretty good groups and all that. I think I was finished 11th in the end, which again, very pleased with that as well. Picking up people in the second half, I think I did quite well in moving through the field there. It was probably less the course and more the slippery conditions that made it a little bit slower, I think, in the first half there, where it was lots of cobbled stuff, like I say, which is just not great in super shoes. If you're on slippery cobbles, they just, none of them grip that well. I'd say some do better than this Hoka though, which has not got that, like I say, the best grip, but performance of the shoe, yeah, can't really argue with it. Like, the Rocket X2 really does put Hoka, in line with most super shoes out there now. I think after a few years, it was only kind of one or two big players. Now, most brands have very good super shoes, and you're kind of picking between them more on personal preference rather than anything. Rocket X2 is certainly a really strong option. I do think it is the faster shoe from Hoka if you're looking between the Cielo and the Rocket X2. Like, I love the Cielo. I've done more miles in the Cielo than any other shoe this year, I think, and just using it for lots of long training runs. I have raced in it as well, but it's big, it's bouncy, but you just got a little bit more kind of rev from the Rocket X2. It's lighter, it feels racier, and especially someone like myself, I'm like a high cadence runner. I probably don't get as much bounce from the Cielo as some people, so I prefer the lighter feel of the Rocket X2, which just gives you that faster turnover and that slightly more fast feel, especially over something like a 10k. So yeah, enjoyed that. Just been checking out the GPS tracks from the watches and the heart rate. Do the heart rate first. Both do kind of okay. Both were kind of out by a similar amount in different directions. So the Forerunner 265 was quite low for lots of the race, it looks like, on the heart rate, and then the Coros Pace Pro had a good stretch where it was in line with the heart rate monitor, but then did jump quite high at the end, had a little jump at the beginning. Really cold conditions. It's just tough for optical heart rate monitoring. Like, I would always prefer to use an armband or a chest sensor myself. You see the nice steady progression in heart rate you get from that, the Polar Verity sense, which is just a little bit more accurate. But both watches were kind of okay. They were ballpark okay. Some dives off the Garmin, and like I say, the big jump on the Coros at the start and at the end. But overall, they were kind of fine. I think the averages isn't that far out from my overall average, and they probably performed fairly similar to each other. I think probably the Pace Pro is slightly more accurate in the middle there, but overall, similar performance on those front. And then on the GPS, like, it's interesting that they are quite different. So the Coros was closer to the distance of 10k. That's good. I think that wins out on that front for sure, because I wasn't running very tight lines. I probably was running a bit further than 10k. I think that's probably the more accurate overall distance from Coros there, and it was certainly closer to the markers each kilometre than the Garmin throughout the race. Look at the actual track though. I don't know where Garmin has picked up so much more than the Coros, because they do look pretty similar throughout the race. Like, both of them have little wobbles where they go quite wide outside of a street, and the finish line, they each have you on different sides of the roads entirely, which is interesting because I don't think that was fairly open bit of the course, so I thought they'd be quite accurate there. But then they really dial in on long stretches where clearly the GPS conditions were a bit better. But for a city centre race, I would say pretty impressive GPS from both those watches. Like, was following the right areas. Most of the time I was on the road, not running through too many buildings, and it just looks, given the twisty nature of the course, in amongst high buildings, I think they both did a pretty good job. Overall distance, Coros was closer, and it was certainly better for pace. I wasn't really pacing with the watch in the race, I will say that. So although I did notice, every lap split, and I'm looking at the markers and seeing how close they were both obviously coming up a bit before the marker came around, because they ended up with reading a bit long. But if I was going to be pacing using the watch, the Coros would have been more accurate on the day between the two of them, so that's a win for the Coros as well. So I'd say overall on accuracy, they're both pretty similar, but you've got to give the edge to the Coros, I'd say, on both of those fronts in that race. I think the heart rate was a little bit more dialed in for the middle part of the race in particular, and then the overall distance and pacing of the GPS was probably slightly better as well, but both performed really very well. I think on the accuracy front now, like this mid-range band of watches is kind of my favourite band of watches now. We've also got the Suunto Race S and the Polar Vantage M3, where you're getting the accuracy that you'd get from the top-end watches now, and it's really whether you want the other features from those top-end watches, like the more rugged designs or the maps, which you don't get on the Garmin, but you do actually get on the Coros. That was interesting, and it was useful for me while I was here in Paris. My first run in the city, I did a long run using the navigation on both watches. Maps was certainly a plus on the Pace Pro here, so it's had a good weekend all round. It's also doing very well on battery life. That was the other thing. So because this was a weekend away, both of these are AMOLED watches. It's interesting to see if they could last the full weekend away, and both of them have done, but the Coros has lasted longer on battery life, I'd say. So I charged these fully on Thursday afternoon. I came over Friday morning, did a long run, and then ran on Saturday as well. Have done the race now, and the Coros is at 58%, so very good, really. Looking at that kind of period, like it was, over an hour and a half of running on Friday, the hour odd yesterday and today, and the Garmin has dropped to 29%. So big disparity on the battery life there. So the Pace Pro, if you're looking at kind of an AMOLED watch, you go for a weekend away without taking a charger, doing a lot of running, it would have the edge. Like, it was only a 10k today. I was looking at something like a half marathon. start to be thinking about having to charge the Garmin potentially, but you know, it would be fine until tomorrow. But yeah, I'm going back today. If I was going back on Monday, then the extra battery life from the Coros would certainly be a bit of a boon. So all round a good weekend for the Coros Pace Pro when looking at it in comparison to the biggest name in that mid-range watch field, which is the Forerunner 265. But certainly some other advantages to the 265 we'll go into in more detail when we get round to more of a comparison video. But yeah, all round, really enjoyable day out, really fun race, massive field out there, loads of people out there, like really was quite a good atmosphere throughout the race, despite the fact it was quite damp and cold at the start, everyone having a good time. Surprisingly fast course, I would say, given that I thought it wasn't going to be very fast at all, but you know, it was quick enough, I'd say. You could go and run hard on that. Like I say, great atmosphere. I had a really good time out there and delighted with my result on the day.